Israel's political leadership has said that if Hamas does not release more hostages soon, the IDF will launch an attack against them in the Gaza Strip, which will be beyond anything ever seen before, and the hostages need to be released by the end of this week. The intelligence echelon believes that Hamas will only release a few more living hostages or possibly the remains of those who have died in captivity. Hamas has its own plan, and it includes the use of psychological terror, releasing videos showing hostages suffering in captivity. Now, with the approval of Matan Angrast's parents, the first documentation of him in captivity can be published openly, and they include pictures taken about 6 months ago showing him bruised and battered. Meanwhile, Hamas is creating a false narrative and image of widespread hunger in the Gaza Strip despite the presence of enormous quantities of food. The Palestinian terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip have also raised the level of alert amongst all their operatives in preparation for the possibility of renewed fighting at any moment. Elsewhere, the Egyptians have submitted a draft plan for Gaza, which does not include Hamas. We'll take a look at that. And Israel's defense minister also announced that a formal directorate will be established to coordinate the immigration of Gaza residents, while the IDF confirmed that strikes were carried out against a suspicious boat and a terrorist in Gaza. In the northern arena, the IDF attacked a Syrian boat city, and Turkish President Erdogan said that you will not achieve your goal. But then there were reports of another IDF strike on the border with Lebanon. And speaking of Lebanon, the Hezbollah terrorist organization is shattered. A report in the British Guardian news portal paints a picture of collapse in southern Lebanon, with residents in distress and Hezbollah powerless to assist them. On the other hand, the new Lebanese army is more Shiite, more dangerous, and not doing its job, with some commanders cooperating with Hezbollah instead of confronting it, even handing over American-supplied equipment to them to help Hezbollah rebuild. Is Lebanese President Joseph Aoun selling illusions when he says that only the state will be responsible for security? And to the south, against the backdrop of the Houthis' threats to renew attacks against Israel, the damage from Israeli strikes on Yemen's critical infrastructure in recent months is revealed. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 515 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Shiite militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are acting under the control and command of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And another reminder, our Rebuild Israel campaign is live. So if you want to be part of restoring hope, please go to the address that you see on your screen. Now, let's get into the news. And as Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz spoke on Monday evening about a possible return to fighting in Gaza, declaring that if the hostages are not released soon, Hamas will meet the IDF with a power it has never known. We will return to fighting, and they will face the IDF with powers and methods they have never known until a complete victory. We will never allow Hamas to rule Gaza again. This fight will end with two clear achievements: the release of all the hostages and the crushing of Hamas's rule in Gaza. Although the ceasefire is still formally in effect, there have already been localized clashes. In the last 24 hours, 2 incidents of IDF strikes occurred in the Gaza Strip. In one strike, gunfire was directed at a suspicious boat in the Khan Yunis area. In another incident, the IDF forces fired at 2 suspects who approached IDF forces in the southern part of Gaza. So where does the ceasefire officially stand? Phase A is over, and we are facing Phase B and the end of the war? It seems to me that here in Israel, there are other plans, A senior Israeli official said on Monday evening in a conversation that United States Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will come to this region only if he sees Hamas's willingness for a breakthrough to continue the deal, and not under the current conditions. Meanwhile, Israel placed a request on the table in Cairo to create a bridging solution for a few days this week, which would include releasing hostages, but when Hamas refused, it was decided to close the border crossings completely. Despite the mediator's request for Israel to postpone action for a few days to continue talks with Hamas, it appears there is no breakthrough. Hamas does not continue to release the hostages according to the agreement until the next phase is settled, and Israel will return to fighting by the end of next week. It's important to remember Israel's policy that there is no such thing as a ceasefire that is not accompanied by the release of hostages. From our perspective, negotiations must take place either under fire or under an agreed agreement. And here, Hamas simply did not agree to continue in a manner acceptable to the parties, and that's why the decision was made on the night between Saturday and Sunday regarding humanitarian aid, and it currently looks like that the IDF is about to resume the fighting inside Gaza. This raises an obvious question about how the fighting this time will be different. For one thing, much larger forces will be devoted to Gaza than in the past. 4 divisions will be operating simultaneously, concentrating the entire population of the Gaza Strip in one place and imposing a real siege on Hamas wherever it is, including on humanitarian aid. If we act in these ways, we can reach a decision. We have the backing from the United States, and the situation is completely different from what it was over the past year and a half. In a certain sense, Hamas is a rational organization. It's clever, and it knows exactly what it wants. The last thing it wants is to lose its territory in Gaza and be wiped off the face of this earth. Over the past year and a half, it has learned that it can challenge us and still hold onto the hostages without being defeated. On the last day of the ceasefire, it effectively controlled most of the territory and most of the Gazan population, and that is something that is actually unacceptable in order to defeat this organization. So Hamas is also making visible preparations for a return to fighting, and Israeli officials have said that the IDF is watching these preparations and making preparations of their own to counter them. Among other priorities in a new round of fighting will be the targeted elimination of senior Hamas officials who are involved in stealing humanitarian aid shipments intended for the Gazan residents, as well as the destruction of government buildings and the terror organization's civil role. The officials noted that a new plan to resume fighting has not yet been approved by the cabinet in Israel, and that only United States President Donald Trump may persuade Netanyahu not to renew the fighting. However, the decision to stop the entry of aid trucks into the Gaza Strip, which was implemented on Sunday, was made with American backing. This policy is very different from that of the previous administration, which at the time pressured Israel to allow the entry of goods. In Jerusalem, they saw that if the pressure of halting the entry of goods does not lead Hamas to accept the hostage release outline, more pressure measures are in the pipeline. Support for these measures steps on Hamas comes alongside American support for the Israeli demand that Hamas no longer rule Gaza. White House National Security Council spokesperson Brian Hodges was asked yesterday about the decision to stop the trucks, and he replied that Israel has negotiated in good faith since the start of the current administration's term to ensure the release of the hostages held by Hamas in captivity. He added that the Trump administration will support their decision regarding the next steps, considering that Hamas announced that it is no longer interested in a ceasefire. Senior figures in the political leadership have added that if a return to fighting is required, it will be more intense due to a change in 2 areas. The first is the significant support coming from the Trump administration compared to the previous administration, with just last week an approval of sending a very large scope of new weapon shipments while shortening bureaucracy and other procedures. The second is the expected change in the military leadership, as the current Chief of Staff, Herzi Halevi, is retiring and the new Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, will take office this Wednesday. And meanwhile, Egypt is trying to find a solution that will avoid the evacuation of the Gazan population. Clauses from the draft of the Gaza plan formulated by Egypt to provide a counterweight to Trump's Gaza plan were published on Monday by the American news agency Reuters. According to the proposal, Hamas will not rule the Gaza Strip, the Gazans will not be exiled to other countries, and Gaza would be governed by temporary bodies under the control of Arab states and Western countries. Egypt's vision for Gaza is supposed to be presented at the Arab Summit in Cairo, which is expected to convene on Wednesday. We note that the proposal does not specify whether this would be implemented before or after the ceasefire agreement is signed between Israel and Hamas. And additionally, the Egyptian plan does not address critical issues like who will pay for Gaza's reconstruction or detail specific framework for governments in the Gaza Strip, nor how Hamas will be convinced to discontinue its rule in the Gaza Strip. However, other parties to the situation have plans that are much better organized. On Monday, a senior American official told senior Israeli figures to kill them all to the last one of them. Hamas in Gaza is an obstacle to normalization. By that, the official was speaking of a normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which is a major geostrategic objective of the Trump administration. And additionally, Defense Minister Israel Katz has instructed the defensive establishment to establish an official directorate that will promote and manage the immigration of Gaza residents from the Gaza Strip in coordination with other governments and ministries. This is also in line with President Trump's plan for the relocation of Gaza's residents. It is important to point out that Israel has not violated any agreement with Hamas, as many commentators have claimed and repeated. Because at this point, Hamas is not continuing the negotiation, and according to the ceasefire agreement, Israel can resume fighting in the Gaza Strip until a new agreement is reached. Hamas still holds hostages. Those are the strongest advantages that he still has. He also holds under his patronage nearly 2 million people who are also hostages of this terror cult that rules the Gaza Strip. I'm talking about the Palestinian people, and a large majority of whom also support that same cult of murderers. Israel must contend with this complication. Its goal is twofold. One, to defeat as much as possible the cult of murderers, Hamas. Also to free the hostages, and at the same time to cause as little harm as possible to those who are not aiding the band of murderers of Hamas. This is a difficult set of problems to overcome, but Israel has done so in the past, with God's help, and I have no doubt that we will do so again. And we're counting on you to stand with us in prayer. So here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update diligently in the coming days on any development in the return of fighting in the Gaza Strip. A moment before we continue, I want to ask you to hit that subscribe button so you stay tuned to the truth. It helps us reach more people around the world. And speaking of the truth, Israel is facing challenges. And in times like this, standing together means everything. One of the most meaningful ways to show support is by strengthening Israel's economy. When you buy Israeli-made products, you're not just making a purchase, you're helping small businesses, artisans, and families who rely on their craft to make a living. A strong economy brings stability, creates jobs, and helps communities thrive, even in difficult times. Every purchase is a reminder to the people of Israel that they are not alone. Even if you can't be here in person, you can still uplift Israeli creators from wherever you are. Arza delivers hand-picked treasures, delicious foods, handcrafted goods, and unique gifts, bringing the heart of Israel into your home. So join us in making a real impact. Visit www.arzabox.com and use the code 18TBNIL for 18% off your subscription. More than a gift, it's a way to stand with Israel. Now, back to the news, and we're switching our focus to the northern arena and the border with Syria, as Israeli fighter jets hit targets in the area of the port city Tartus in Syria on Monday evening. The IDF statement said that the strike in the Kardach region of Syria was against a military site where weapons belonging to the previous regime in Syria were stored. Due to recent developments in the area, it was decided to strike infrastructure at that site. And according to Syrian reports, the target of the strike was a former air defense battalion, and before the strikes, the IDF sent SMS messages to residents in the Syrian coastal area stating, "To the residents of the coast, stay away from terrorist gathering centers." About 2 hours after the strike in Tartus, Al Jazeera reported another strike was carried out by the IDF in the Janta area on the Syria-Lebanon border, and the IDF commonly strike in the vicinity when it detects Hezbollah attempts to smuggle weapons, narcotics, and other contraband. Let us recall that the day before yesterday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz warned the regime in Syria not to harm the Druze residents in the city of Jarmana near Damascus. And in recent times, since the fall of the Assad regime, Israel has maintained connections with the Druze communities in southern Syria and even delivered humanitarian aid supplies to them. Even after the change of regime in Syria, the IDF frequently strikes in the country. In Assad's days, Iran's entrenchment infrastructure in Syria was targeted alongside the Assad regime's infrastructure. But in recent days, Israel decided that it demands from the new regime in Syria that the area bordering Israel from Damascus southward be demilitarized. Katz clarified Israel's stance by saying that any attempt by the Syrian regime forces and the terror organizations in the country to establish themselves in the security zone in southern Syria will be met with fire. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on developments in Syria going forward. And as always, we ask you to help us by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and clicking on the subscribe button if you haven't already. These are the best ways that you can help us continue spreading the truth. Now, staying in the northern arena, the British news portal The Guardian published an article this week on the despair and collapse in southern Lebanon following the war with Israel, which brought heavy destruction and thousands of casualties. According to the report, thousands gathered in the ruined square of the town of Atiraun for a mass funeral of 95 people. This is one of the largest funerals in the country since the outbreak of this conflict. Hundreds of Hezbollah supporters, waving the organization's flags, watched the procession of coffins against the backdrops of ruins left by the Israeli bombings. According to The Guardian, 13 months of fighting are taking a heavy toll on Hezbollah. Once was considered the strongest militia in the world, but now is facing severe blows that have undermined its standing. Nevertheless, Hezbollah remains a dominant political force in Lebanon, and a Western diplomat in Beirut told The Guardian, right now they're in a state of waiting and recovery, but one must not underestimate them. In related news, a new report by the Alma think tank reveals disturbing details about the Lebanese army, the entity that is currently deployed in south of the country and is supposed to maintain stability. The authors warn of the Shiitization trend in the Lebanese army, given the end of conscription and the natural demographic changes in the population of Lebanon. Over the years, there has been a decline in the recruitment of young men from the Christian community who often have better economic options, while there has been an increase in the recruitment of Shiite youths. In fact, according to the report, there is already a high likelihood of a Shiite majority inside the Lebanese army. The authors of the document warn that commanders, officers, and other soldiers, mainly Shiites, cooperate with Hezbollah and neutralize its ability to serve as a counterweight to the pro-Iranian Hezbollah organization. For example, on the original ceasefire's expiration date of January 26, the Lebanese army failed to prevent Lebanese civilians from infiltrating areas where the IDF was deployed. The failure stemmed from the Lebanese armies and the Shiite commanders' lack of willingness and ability to confront Hezbollah. The authors of this document warn that commanders, officers, and other soldiers, mainly Shiites, cooperate with Hezbollah, allowing it to operate freely and bypass international agreements, for example, United Nations Resolution 1701. This is a major problem because the Lebanese National Army is the chief cornerstone of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah. If they are unable to fulfill their assigned functions, the IDF will have no choice but to continue confronting Hezbollah and striking it when and where it poses a threat to Israel. So guys, keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. Here at TBN Israel, we also bring you our new news website that delivers in-depth articles in real time and updates of what is happening in Israel. So visit it at www.tbnisrael.com to stay tuned to the truth in real time. And switching our focus further south, in light of the possibility of returning to fighting in Gaza, the Houthi terrorist organization in Yemen is threatening to renew attacks against Israel. But assessments of Israel's latest strikes in Yemen are expected to render the threats meaningless. Open source intelligence included from Google Maps shows the scope of the damage inflicted on the Houthis' infrastructure, which includes severe damage to the port of Hodeidah and to the fuel facilities and petrochemical infrastructure in that location. Recall that Israel carried out 5 strikes in Yemen as a result of missile and drone fire directed at Israel by the Houthis. The first attack in Operation Long Arm took place on July 20 of last year, then on September 29 in Operation White City, on December 19 in Operation Sounds of the Vineyard, and on December 26, and the latest strike was carried out on January 10th of this year. So here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development. So guys, keep spreading the truth, follow us, hit that subscribe button, and remain tuned to the truth so you know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And we conclude with a very sad topic. Additional footage from captivity of our beloved and dear hostages who were held by Hamas has been revealed. The parents of the kidnapped soldier, Matan Angast, who was abducted and wounded and was unconscious in a tank at the Nahal Oz base on October 7th, was published on Monday evening. This is the first footage of him in captivity that was filmed at least 6 months after he was abducted. The family also stated that Angast was not returned in the humanitarian phase because he's an Israeli soldier. This is after he was kidnapped when he went out to defend the outpost and the Israeli communities, the kibbutzim, together with his team. Less than a month ago, his father, Chagai, said that the family received a sign of life from Matan through hostages who were released in the deal. The testimonies that the Armored Corps soldier was alive but held wounded in harsh conditions arrived 6 months after he was seen in a psychological terror video that Hamas sent. I want to ask you to continue spreading the truth about what is happening in Israel, and most importantly, pray. Pray for our hostages who are held in the Gaza Strip by the terrible Hamas terrorists. Continue to pray for the people of Israel and for all the civilians that are affected by these terrorist organizations in this region. Talking about the Lebanese people, the people of Gaza, the people of Yemen, and more people across this region, the Middle East. And most importantly, don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And together, we will win this war because God is on our side.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.